And if you would like to get things going, feel free.
Awesome. All right. Thanks everybody for being here. As Jean noted, I'm in Franklin. I have another meeting at 1 o'clock, so I figured I'd be here and then head over there. I think we can call this meeting to order and do a round of introductions. I think it's important to do introductions at every meeting just to make sure we all know who's in the room. They can be brief. You can state your name, your organization and or group and or who you're representing and or who you are. And then if you are a voting member or an alternate member, and then your pronouns, if you would like, that will make more sense in a moment. If you are unfamiliar with pronouns. But so to start off, Lauren Weston, I'm with the Franklin County Natural Resources Conservation District. I'm the chair of this WIC, and I'm a voting member, and my pronouns are she, her, and I'm just going to call on folks that I see. I will pick on Sarah Downs.
She had logged in. I noticed she was going to go print something, she said, so she may be rejoining. Oh, she's here.
She's here.
I forgot to unmute myself. Hi, I'm Sarah Downs. I'm with the Enosburg Conservation Commission, and I am a voting member, she, her.
Dan.
Okay, I'm representing Richford, and I'm a voting member.
Kent.
Ed Henderson, Chair of the Friends of Northern Lake Champlain. I'm a voting member, and I'm a grandpa.
There you go.
Does
Abe.
that make me a him, her, or him, he?
Awesome. Thank you, Kent.
Hi, everyone. I'm Abraham Ames. I work for the Orleans County Conservation District. I am listed as an alternate. However, Sarah Damsel, who is my manager and who is the primary member from our organization, she and I discussed and agreed that it would make more sense for me to be a primary and for her to be the alternate. So if we could make that change official here and now, that is where she and I decided would make more sense.
Perhaps amend the agenda to include the adjustment.
That sounds great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank
He,
you.
him.
Beth.
I am Beth Torpy with NVDA. I'm a voting member, and I am she, her.
Thank you. Barry.
With the Northwest Regional Planning Commission. I'm a voting member and pronouns are he, him.
And then I have in my memory that it's Jack is Jack, would you like to go next? I'm also thinking maybe your name isn't Jack, but your Zoom name is Jack. I don't know why I'm thinking that.
Yeah, Jake Kucher, however you can say it. And I'm an alternate representing municipalities, I believe. And he, him, I say this right?
Yes.
I'm also a grandpa. So somebody else.
There you go. Lindsey.
Hi guys, I'm Lindsey White with the Missisquoi River Basin Association. I am a voting member and your vice chair, and she, her.
Thanks. Ellen.
I'm Ellen Fox, and I'm also with the Missisquoi River Basin Association. I am the alternate, and this is my first time at one of the meetings, and so I'm really delighted to be here and see you all. And my pronouns are she, her.
And then Tom.
Hi, Tom Brizzleton, Friends of Northern Lake Champlain. I'm the alternate, he, him.
Thank you very much. And Emily.
Hey, Emily Charrington with Town of St. Albans Stormwater Utility, and my pronouns are she, her. Alternate also. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Emily. I think I've got everyone besides Dean. But I think we all know Dean. I will have him introduce yourself. But did I miss anyone else on the WIC? or otherwise? Okay. Dean, would you like to introduce yourself? And then I'm also
Sure.
noting that Dea isn't here.
Yes, and I was just going to say Dean Pierce, staff, he, him, and Dea is away, and she will be creating the minutes from the video. So as the meeting goes on, please just try to slip in your name as you speak, so that'll make it a little bit easier, and especially if you're making a motion or a second.
Wonderful. Thanks everybody for that round of introductions. The next step, based on those introductions, I thought it'd be helpful just to have some Zoom norms. I know we talked about it last time, but just for clarity for when we're doing things. So I'm gonna go ahead and say page 3. Thank you. Thanks, Dean. These are just some draft norms that on the internet that seems like a good idea. They were all in your packet, so hopefully you've had a chance to review them. And this was kind of just in terms of making sure that we're clear on who is a voting member on any given day versus who is an alternate on any given day, and for minutes and public record. So introductions at each meeting as possible. Yes, Dean.
Just maybe for people's benefit, if you could put your hand near the mic on your phone or whatever mic you're using, there's just a bit of wind noise. So if you can try to cut that down, people might be able to hear you better.
Is this the microphone? Did that help at all? Maybe not.
Maybe a little.
How about that? Is that better?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay, this is apparently where the microphone is then. Learn something new every day. And so we were thinking of having people rename themselves on Zoom with their full name, the organization that you're representing, or the group. And then if you are a voting or an alternate member, and your pronouns, if you would like. There is a link in your packet that explains pronouns and why they're important to have in public spaces. So assumptions are not made in general. So if you would be interested in learning more about that, please visit that link, or feel free to ask me any questions after this meeting. If you don't know how to change your Zoom name, you can right click on your own picture in Zoom, and it should give you the option to rename. And then you can type in your organization, your name, your organization, voting, and your pronouns if you would like. And then when you're on future meetings, you can rename yourself again if you're not in this meeting and you're on a different Zoom meeting and people are like, why does it say voting? So that is one idea that we had just to make it clearer and easier for the public record. Thought it would be a good norm that you're expected, if you are a voting member on any given day and or an alternate, ideally everyone would have their cameras turned on during the entirety of the meeting as possible. If you have low bandwidth or have internet issues, I completely understand if you need to turn your video off. Additionally, if you get up to walk away or you're moving locations and you don't want to make us all dizzy, feel free to turn it off then. Expected to stay focused, avoid multitasking. I like this guidance. If you wouldn't do something in an in-person meeting, don't. I see that I have my own typo there. Don't do it in a virtual meeting. We were thinking of using the raise hand function on Zoom just to make sure we had a queue of folks when it's time to speak on each item. So if you don't know where your raise hand function is, if you move your mouse on your screen, the reactions smiley face plus at the bottom of your screen should show up. You can click on that, and then the bottom bar says raise hand. And if you can't figure that out, feel free to actually raise your hand, and we will keep an eye on that as well. We'll figure we would use the raise hand function for voting as well, since it's hard to tell who is saying yes or voting when it's time to actually vote on something, because you can talk over each other in Zoom, which is a little complicating. It stacks it. If you raise your hand function, it stacks who rose their hand first in the Zoom queue. So that will be helpful in making sure everybody gets a chance to speak. It's expected that you'll stay muted until called upon. If for some reason you're off mute and we hear a bunch of noise in your background, we might mute you. And then if you do write something in the chat, just to make sure that it's part of the public record, we'll make sure that the QUISP staff, Dean or Dea, say it out loud in the recording and show who said it in the chat as well. We don't have to vote on these, but they are open for discussion if you like or dislike them or want different ones or other ones. I just thought it would be a good place to start to make sure we have some sort of procedure. So yeah, I'll open the floor if anybody has any comments. All right, seeing none, let's give that a try. Oh, Barry, I see you came off mute.
Oh, very perceptive. I'm using a different computer, and for some reason I don't have access to that menu that allows you access to those things. I think because I'm using the web version, so don't think that I'm ignoring you on this time around.
Fair enough. Yeah. So if you don't have access to the functions, feel free to like literally raise your hand, and I'll keep an eye on it, and Dean will keep an eye on it, and make sure you do get your point across in turn. We don't want to skip anybody accidentally. Yes, Kent.
Back on my regular.
You've got to understand, I'm a real simpleton when it comes to entering my name and title and everything.
Sure.
So I'm probably not going to be able to do this till Allison is sitting beside me.
Fair enough.
But I am wondering if I put in this voting and alternate, is that going to show up at every Zoom meeting that I attend from here on? Or
So
how does that work?
if you make a change in this meeting, it is very likely that in the next meeting you show up in, it will show up as well, but you can then take it off again. So it's a little bit annoying on and off. And we can make changes if that doesn't seem like a reasonable request. But you should just be able to, right click on your own picture. And then towards the bottom of the list, it says rename. And that should get you there.
Okay, I'll give it a shot. I've got excellent support here.
Fair enough. And yeah, happy to, maybe we can send out a tutorial too with the meeting minutes. Yes, Sarah.
How do you get your hand down after you put it up?
Great question. So it's the same process. You go back to reactions and it'll say lower hand now instead of where it said raise hand. Good question. There you go. Dean, I saw you physically raise your hand.
Yes, and I just wanted to say that for anybody that really struggles with this but wants to change it, as the person who set up the meeting, I can change it for you. So for example, I could have lowered Sarah's hand. So if somebody wants something changed, just let me know and I can also do that. And so now can anybody else who's made a co-host. But anyway, keep it simple. I can make changes if you would like me to do it for you.
Awesome. Thank you, Dean. Any further comments or questions on these ideas? And if you hate them, please let me know too. Just figured it would be a way to try to get some procedure going and some clarity. All right, I will move along to the next item on the agenda, which is, Dean, you're so great. I did print it out because I didn't have two screens with me today. A review and adjustment and approval of the agenda. So I think we should add the unseating and reseating of the Orleans County NRCD folks. Not sure where you want to put that, Dean. You're muted.
It's really your pleasure. We could do it after public comment and just take care of it early. So a 5A.
5A sounds great. Thank you. Sarah doesn't need to be here for that, right? Since Abe's here.
Well, I would like the board to be able to take some kind of action. We may need to like follow up and take care of technicalities. I'm just not sure, but I don't want to discourage the group from doing it so that it's done its part. It's the appointments are really the responsibility of conservation districts as a group. So, you know, I don't want to hold up the group from making this change, but we may have to do some additional follow-up steps is the short answer.
Sounds good. All right, so we will add that to the agenda as 5A. Any other agenda items to add today? Right. Seeing none, I believe I need to ask for a motion to approve the agenda as amended with point 5A. If someone would like to come off mute, say your name and that you make that motion, that would be great. And then if a second person could do the same thing, that would be great. And then we'll do a hand raise.
This is Lindsay, and I motion that we approve the amended agenda.
Excellent.
Sarah Downs, I second it.
Wonderful. And now now folks who've recused themselves, let me know, and then raise your hand, please. If anyone does recuse yourself, please come off mute and then, or abstain, I think is the right word. And then everyone else, if you could please raise your hand if you approve. So I am seeing Beth, Dan, Lindsay, Sarah, Kent, Barry, and myself. I raised my hand as well. Wonderful. All right, we'll get better at that. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate it. Looks like it went pretty well. All right, moving on to approval of minutes. Does anyone have any questions, comments, or concern about the minutes from Wednesday, June 1? Hey, we got 2 meetings in the same month. I'm impressed. Tina, I don't know if you can scroll to the second page. I think there's 2 pages. There you go. I have no comments. If anyone else does have a comment, please raise your hand. And if not, we can take a motion to approve.
This is Lindsay. I motion to approve the minutes from the June 1st meeting as written.
Thank you, Lindsay.
This is Sarah, I second it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. Does anyone recuse themselves, perhaps if they were not in attendance that day? All right. Seeing none, please raise your hand if you approve the minutes. All right, I see Lindsay, Dan, Beth, Sarah, Kent, Barry, and Lauren. Thank you very much, everyone. Dean, if Dea finds that she would rather me say everybody's last name too, please let me know. I know typically the recordings don't show all participants. It's usually just the person who's talking. All right. Moving on to public comment, not related to items on the agenda. If anyone has public comment, please let us know. All right, hearing none, We will move on to the added agenda item 5A, which is the appointment / reseating of the seat currently held by Sarah Damsel of the Orleans County Natural Resources Conservation District to have Abraham Ames fill that seat and move Sarah Damsel to alternate. So just doing a little swap there for Orleans County. Do I hear a motion to make that appointment?
Does Beth have her hand up, or is that held over?
I think that held over. Thanks, Beth.
And just, sorry. In terms of my interpretation of what the council would have authority to do, it would be something to the effect of, I'm moving to seat Sarah Damsel as the alternate in the event the conservation districts name someone as the new representative for that spot. And we all expect that that would be Abraham, because that's what's in the works. But the authority that the council has relates to seating of the alternate.
Okay, so we will do, as Dean said, assuming the conservation district group seats Abraham as the main BWIC member through their own internal process, Sarah Damsel would be seated as the alternate. Is that correct, Dean? Okay. Do I hear that motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Sarah.
Sarah.
Yeah. And anyone else to second?
This is Lindsay, I'll second.
Thank you, Lindsay. Anyone abstaining from this vote? All right, all others, please raise your hand. Excellent. I see Kent, Barry, Lindsay, Beth, Dan, Sarah, and Lauren. The motion passes. Thank you, everyone. And Dean and I will work on the back end of that to formally get Abraham seated as the BWIC member through the NRCD process.
Thank you.
All right. Oh, thanks, Abe. Dean, I'm going to hand it off to you and I'll go on mute.
Okay, so in everyone's packet, there was material related to the bylaws. And if you didn't get that, extreme apologies. But what I thought I would do is highlight some of the things that may still be up for discussion. And one of those has to do with section 901. So section 901 of the rules, or of the draft bylaws, I'm going to pull up on the screen, is called decision-making process. You can, or should be able to see the text on the screen that right now. The BWIC will operate in an open consensus-based process whenever possible, and results of discussions reflected in the meeting minutes when not possible. It goes on from there. The conversation that's been had so far would insert some possible new text, and that's what's shown on the screen here. And I apologize, but I think I'll just read it to you. It reads as follows. BWIC members will thoughtfully consider each point raised during the initial discussion of a BWIC agenda item. When such consideration reveals substantial disagreement among members, the BWIC will allot 1/2 hour for dialogue aimed at addressing the disagreement. The time allotted for dialogue may be extended if a majority of the BWIC approves. During the time allotted for dialogue, all BWIC members participating in a meeting will endeavor to reach agreement on a course of action. When pursuing a mutually acceptable solution, members will, insofar as possible, hold each other accountable, ensure minority opinions are heard and considered, and demonstrate equity in the decision-making process. Simply put, they will demonstrate a commitment to building a productive and inclusive meeting environment. The aim of the procedure outlined above is to support productive and inclusive decision-making without undermining the BWIC's effort to address the majority of items on any BWIC agenda. Note, the BWIC may move on from an agenda item without scheduling a dialogue if a motion is passed by a majority of the BWIC or if consensus is achieved without a vote. I'm not expecting to say much more. This is a statement of essentially intention and desire. It would guide how the council operates in the future. I think it's rather forward-looking of the group to consider language something like this, but ultimately it's up to the group to decide whether or not you would like it added. If there is agreement to add it, then it would be included in whatever motion is made regarding the full set of the bylaws. I think, Lauren, I would just turn things over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Dean. So just wanted to provide additional context. Dean and I worked back and forth with Lindsey as well on this, based on the consensus-based conversation we had last time and trying to make that fit. The intentions of consensus-based decision-making fit within a Roberts Rule majority kind of system. So just making very clear, if we do run into a point of substantial disagreement, how we would deal with it. And if not, we're free to just move along with Robert's rules, but just trying to create a good environment for all to participate. Happy to take any questions or make changes as needed. Just thought it'd be good to have that down. Yes, Barry.
Sorry, new computer, couldn't find the mute button on this one. Can you tell me what page you're on?
It was in the packets, there was a page. It wasn't embedded in the document. So it's page 13 of 25 in the PDF. And I also had it on the screen as a separate slide, but it's the text shown here.
Got it.
And also we can give this a try. And if we learn something doesn't work about it, we can certainly make changes at that time as well, via a similar motion to amend our bylaws. Does anyone else have comment, question, or concern about this change in language for decision-making processes? All right, Dean, do you want to do, there were additional changes as well, or do you want to vote on this?
I think it depends on how formal the group wants to be. If there's a consensus that would suggest that there isn't going to be a debate about it later, if there is a vote on the package of the bylaws overall. There isn't a motion on the floor already to approve the bylaws. So I think this is just a good, healthy discussion that will set up a motion or a pair of motions. In terms of other issues that were raised at the last meeting, it has to do with the question of conflict of interest. And there was material in the package about conflict of interest. Basically, there are essentially 4 routes forward. One would be to just put a hold on this and to wait to see what the DEC, the Department of Environmental Conservation guidance on conflict of interest says. Another different direction would be to try to incorporate language from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns model policy. Apologies for the misspelling there. A different option is to look at what CCRPC and Basin 5 did. There was even another example from the Regional Planning Commission ourselves, which has a existing policy. The language that is in the rule, I'm sorry, in the draft bylaws is on the screen right here. That's Article 10. And it's pretty simple because it really taps into the definition that is contained in rule and then doesn't do much more, essentially, because the definition of what a conflict of interest is pretty constrained by rule, and it is an interest, direct or indirect, financial or otherwise, of a person or entity with BWIC decision-making role or such an interest known to such person of a member of that person's immediate family or household or a business associate in the outcome of a particular matter pending before the BWIC, or which is in conflict with the proper discharge of the person's duties under this rule. It would take a long time to parse all that out. I'm hoping people have had a chance to look on it before. And I don't want to sound resigned, but it is almost a given that it is in the rule. And if the council wanted to try to apply a different definition of conflict of interest, it might make its own life more difficult. And so I'm not encouraging the council to go in that direction, but I think it's worthy of a discussion. The rule also says what's supposed to happen when a council member has a conflict of interest. And that's what's written up in the second paragraph, which is not a literal copying of the rule, but paraphrases it. BWIC members that propose to implement a clean water project must disclose any potential conflict of interest and shall recuse themselves from any BWIC decision-making subject to that conflict. Notwithstanding these limitations, a BWIC member who is conflicted because they're the project sponsor may answer questions on the subject. So to boil all of this down, the definition of conflict of interest in rule is pretty broad. If you're a representative of an organization or some entity that's sponsoring a project, then you have to be thinking about stepping aside from a vote where the fate of that project is at question. If it's part of a prioritization question or something like that, it's the flags are raised and the bells go off that you will need to step aside. And that's unfortunate because it does mean that we have to move an alternate up, assuming there's an alternate for the vote to count. But something that's a little different from the way conflict of interest is usually held is that the person would still get to speak. So that means that if you are the sponsoring organization, you don't have to leave the meeting, which is generally good practice, so that you don't have the influence. You can still stay in the meeting and answer questions about it. The examples from the League of Cities and Towns is a good one. It's extensive, it's comprehensive, it deals with situations of two types, including a type that this council won't really have to worry about. So it isn't really applicable. But anyway, I provided the material so people would have something to compare the language that we drafted as staff, something to compare that to, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about why we continue to think this kind of minimal approach is the best approach. I can expect that some people, the question really has more to do with what are we going to do if? And we have a pretty good idea of what the if is. And the if is things like, we don't have enough votes. Can we improvise and things like that? Anyway, I'll stop babbling and answer any questions people have about the draft language or any of the materials that were included in the packet.
Dean, I'll just comment. I think we did change that word implement to fund in
Yes,
previous
we did.
language? Okay,
We did change implement to fund, yes.
okay. Yes. Jake, go ahead.
Okay, being an alternate, I'm not used to sitting on my hands and keeping my mouth shut. But I just would suggest that what Dean's said makes a lot of sense. You know, I think to adopt the Vermont League's language makes a lot of sense so that we don't spend a whole lot of time. And I'm not saying that to rush it through, but you know, I think their version of this is something that we could absolutely work with. That's all I'm going to say. I can't vote, so.
Thanks, Jake. Kent.
Thank you. As I'm reading this article, I'm asking myself, who is the conflict of interest to be reported to? Is it to be reported to the quiz, or is the chair of the council going to be handling these situations? So that's my first question. And then the second thing that I wanted to say was just to be fully in support of this simplistic version of the program, because as you say, we don't have the final rules. So I don't know how deep we can go into it at this point. As I was reading through the various versions, I was seeing how there are certain things that may apply to a watershed group that would not apply to a municipality or governmental group. And especially when I consider that I spend nearly half my time fundraising, and the various organizations that I have to rely upon for my fundraising, how is that going to be interpreted as a conflict of interest if we delve in, into the depth of some of these relationships? I'm kind of concerned about how often I would be recusing myself. So I guess I'm just trying to come around to say that I really am in support of this minimalist approach to this, and move on.
Thank you, Kent. I am seeing that Karen Bates has just joined the meeting. Hi, Karen.
Hello, everyone.
Dean, I want to.
Before I leave, I did have a question at the beginning about where will the concern go? Will it go to the quiz provider, or will it go to the chair?
Yeah, Dean, would you like to respond first?
Sure. The language that's in the bylaws says the recusal occurs when the WIC has decision-making about that conflict. So we're not looking for conflicts on the part of a WIC member. The WIC member would be the person who has primary responsibility for saying, oh, I have a conflict in this instance. Now, I could imagine different council members doing things in different ways. Some council members may simply say, okay, that means I'm going to speak up when there's a vote on a project that my organization has put forward. And I will mention that at the time the vote is going to take place, and before the vote happens, I'm going to recuse myself, but I'll be there for any questions. There may be other council members who are saying, oh, gee, as soon as the application has been filed for a project and it's in the hands of the QUISP to put together as part of some priority list that the council will consider, they may say that I'm going to declare my conflict now. I'm not sure that that would be wrong, but it's putting it out there earlier in the game that conflict is going to exist. And then that may lead the person to do different things. I mean, sometimes when people know they have a conflict of interest, they don't even bother showing up for a meeting. I don't think that's what's intended, by the Act 76 rule. So I would hope that that didn't happen. But long story short is that some people may simply declare it at the time a vote is going to take place, because that's an action, a decision making that is the council is taking. A discussion about something isn't decision making in my mind. You know, it's a discussion. So that person, I think, would be able to take part in that discussion and then step aside when it comes clear that there is going to be a vote. Hope that helps. Is Lauren coming back? Lauren, did you have any thoughts? Or
What I would add is, I think if you know in advance that your project is being discussed, if you could notify both Dean and myself and Lindsay via email as early as possible so that we ensure that an alternate is made available, that would be incredibly helpful. And I think, like, I just want to acknowledge, like, Kent, we hear that there might be more conflicts because of how your organization works. And I think that that's something that we will be actively mindful of and working towards. I feel similarly about my group, so it's definitely on my top of mind. Dean and I have also been going back and forth about how alternates can work, given alternates might be for the same organization as the person who has to recuse themselves. So that's an ongoing discussion as well, and we don't necessarily have a great answer yet. Dean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm interpreting this as if you're the project sponsor, you recuse yourself. But if you have an other tie to an organization putting a project forward that is not recusal worthy, would you agree, Dean?
So the conflicts that this addresses is when someone is working for an organization that's putting money, putting a request in for money. You're, I think, asking if they could not vote on a project that another organization that's making that request. You're asking, would they have to recuse simply because they have a relationship with that other organization? And I think it's a little bit of a close call, but I don't think that that's what's intended by this language. I don't think the intention was to write language in the rule that makes it impossible for WIC members to vote on projects, because Vermont's a small place. Everybody knows everybody, and there are relationships. I think the intention was to set a bar that said, okay, we want to avoid a situation where it looks really bad, where someone is voting on the project that they put in the request for themselves. I think that's what it's about.
And there's an underlying assumption that DEC is going to provide additional language, perhaps at some point related to this.
Yes, the DEC is working on a comprehensive guidance document with many chapters, 7, 8, 10, something like that. It's been much delayed. Conflict of interest is one of them. DEC is having to walk a fine line because there are certain places where, you know, they look at the rule and they say the rule boxes us in, we can't really vary from it. There are other places and instances where it seems like they're prepared for the guidance to say things that are diverting from the rule. This might be one of those places. So I don't think that anyone's hands will be slapped. Firstly, and then secondly, I think that we may just be able to sleep a little bit better at night when the DEC guidance language comes out.
So to me, it sounds like we don't need a formal vote on this language, but we'll kind of all consent to agree to use this as working language pending DEC additional guidance and just note the potential conflicts that we've identified or the potential concerns that we've identified.
I'm not sure I completely understand, but it could mean two things. It could mean that the issue of bylaws will be tabled until the guidance document, which I'm afraid might not be until the fall. Or it could mean that you adopt, there's a motion to approve the bylaws with this understanding that when guidance comes out, if it says something that's very helpful concerning conflict of interest, then you will apply that and adjust the conflict of interest language in the bylaws. So I guess the fundamental question is does the group want to put aside the bylaws until much later, until the guidance is out? And I don't know that that would be my recommendation, because it seems like it's taking way longer than anyone ever imagined it would take.
And so the argument to adopt the bylaws today as amended or as edited would be that in theory, we could then get to the business piece of this work once we have bylaws in place and enhancement fund formula grants are written and we understand how funding works. Oh, and I see Barry's hand up, so I'm gonna let Barry ask another question and then Dean, I'll ask you to respond.
Am I correct that the current issue we're grappling with here is the conflict of interest, or whether we should be waiting on bylaws adoption as a whole until later?
I think so. That could be it. I mean, a third option would be to adopt the bylaws without any section on conflict of interest, and I'm not sure that that's much better, but that would be a third option.
So my question is, are we likely to be making any funding decisions before and having projects come before us before the DEC conflict of interest guidance comes out?
It's unlikely, but it's possible. But it's unlikely, I think.
So I would say that the language that we had, that somebody just said, that we adopted as is, and then we'll incorporate DEC guidance at the appropriate time. Can I make a motion?
Thanks, Barry. I will ask Dean, could you read the chat for the public record as well before we make a motion?
Yes, Emily Sherrington said, unfortunately, I have to leave for another meeting. My only note is that a 3-hour agenda is extremely lengthy. Seldom have blocks that long. I'm not sure. Are we planning to stay for 3 hours? But
there is a note in the bylaws that the maximum length of a meeting is 3 hours.
Okay, I understand now. I thought this was advertised for 3 today. My bad. Yeah, that would certainly be for the board's consideration.
So I make a motion that we adopt the bylaws as is, with the understanding we will revisit the conflict of interest Article 10 when DEC guidance is available.
I will note that Kent Henderson has his hand up. So before we bring this motion to a vote, I would like to ask Kent to speak.
I'd like to second Barry's motion, and I'd like to throw in the comment that this would be an unnecessary roadblock to getting money out to clean up the lake.
And then I would based on Barry's motion, I would just comment that multiple articles may need to be reopened based on DEC guidance. I think they're providing guidance on several articles, so I might ask to amend that motion to we adopt as amended today the bylaws and look forward to considering additions and changes as DEC guidance becomes available. Might be my alteration.
I'm fine with that.
So I'll make that motion if somebody else wants to second that motion. Barry, would you like to second that motion formally?
Sure.
All right. Any abstentions from that vote? All right, seeing none, please raise your hand if you are in favor. I am seeing Lindsay, Beth, Dan, Sarah, Kent, Barry, and Lauren. I just realized on all of our votes, I haven't asked for any nays. Any people voting against this motion, please speak now. Please come off mute. All right, seeing none, motion passes. I see Dean's hands up though, so maybe it doesn't.
Just a question, and a clarification of what was the intention to happen. That was a motion on an amendment to a motion. Are we still, or is it in your mind that there was a friendly amendment and that the action on the whole package has been taken?
My interpretation is that the amendment, or that the entire package has been approved.
Okay, so that's fine. The clarification I seek is I take that this replacement of implement with fund, where we are doing that wasn't understood. The question that remains is the language concerning the decision-making process. Was that part of what we are approving, or is it not part? That part was that aspect was ambiguous to me.
I think you're asking if that shall recuse themselves from any work decision-making process as written, or the previous decision-making process, that stuff. My understanding is that we approved this replacement of language in the decision-making process and the current conflict of interest policy as written with fund replaced.
Okay, that's good. If that is the group, that helps me. That helps me help, yeah.
Does anyone disagree with that? Yes, Sarah.
In parliamentary procedure, when you do an amendment, you're voting just on the amendment, and it can be a replacement, but you still have to go back to the original motion that Barry gave. So we still have to vote on that.
I'm open to withdrawing my motion if that's the case, to clean things up a little.
No, I wouldn't encourage that. I feel some agreement with Sarah's take on this, and so all that needs to happen now is for a vote on the whole package, as everybody now seems to understand the scope of it.
All right, so effectively a revote that we are
It's not
adopting
it's not a revote. It's not a
first
revote.
vote.
It's a vote on the whole package that it's the amended motion that Barry, I believe, had made. It now includes the clarifications that we made through the amendment.
I see.
I'm getting a thumbs up from Sarah, so I feel okay.
Okay, I'm seeing something from Barry too. Would someone like to make that motion?
Its motion has been made.
I don't know.
So we're calling, someone may call the question on that, and you'll actually go to the vote.
You can just ask for a vote right now on the amended motion, which is Barry's and yours together.
Okay, so I'll first ask for any abstentions or recusals. Anyone? No. Okay. Now I'll ask for a vote on the amended motion. Thank you. Sorry, everybody. I am seeing Lindsay, Dan, Beth, Kent, Barry, and Lauren, and Sarah. Any nays? Seeing none. Motion passes. Thank you, everyone, for working through that process with me. This is a good adventure. All right. Dean, I've got a feeling we're on to the next agenda item.
I believe we are.
Okay.
So
I've lost everything.
You lost everything?
Oh, there we go.
Sorry.
Okay.
Okay, sorry, folks. I am moving on to the citizen participation policy and inclusion portion of the agenda. Its first element is the public participation policy, which has been raised before. It has to do with this proposed interim policy that, and I'm going to share this so that people can see. The question that has existed is what will occur? Will we adopt that policy as has been discussed so far? Will the group adopt a revised version that doesn't have any mention of schedule or deadlines, or put off the whole issue until there can be more discussion or work by a subcommittee or group? But the amendment and the paragraph that's in question simply is that, policy was developed as part of the startup, and that within 6 months of the adoption, there will be an effort made to do something that's more robust, and the schedule would be to try to have something more permanent in 12 months. That raised some questions about, is that the right path forward? So it's up for discussion again today. Should we stick with the original plan? Should we simply say the policy was developed as part of the startup phase and it may be amended as deemed appropriate? So just leave it at that first sentence, or just put this aside entirely. I understood that there were some folks who were interested in this topic and maybe doing more work on it and having more discussion, but that's the essence, and I can stop talking.
Yes, I'll open the floor to any comments, questions, or next steps. I believe at the last meeting we had discussed a hesitation around the deadlines and the interest in a working group. I almost wonder if there's a fourth policy that is adopt a revised version of the policy, one without references to schedules or deadlines, and create a subcommittee or working group, just to clearly identify our intent to take this seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts?
I'm looking back at, sorry. I'm looking back at the notes from the last meeting, and I think my recommendation was that we don't have a timeline, that we do establish a working group to develop a policy, that we adopt an interim one and then have a working group. Let me make sure that I'm remembering that about the adopting the, let's see.
So it would be a combination of what I have on the screen now, which is, it would be a motion to approve with the change that the paragraph read, and then there would be a separate motion to create a committee to explore further development. This would have to be tweaked, but yes, I understand the intentions now.
I wonder if it's a revised amendment and that the motion is a combination of this policy was developed as part of the SQUISP startup phase. It may be amended as deemed appropriate by the QUISP and PWIC, and that the policy will be more fully explored by a committee created, or by, I guess I would want the committee to be in the policy formally, would be my thought, have that language that like we are creating a committee. I don't know if that needs to be separate motion. The motions are confusing. Dean, what do you think?
I think it's really the board's preference.
Okay.
I think that either way would be okay. Just the way I initially conceived of this is that you adopt a clean policy by having the language say, remove reference to the schedule and then have a separate motion, but you could have a compound motion And you could further integrate the language on the creation of the committee into the policy. I just tend not to think of that. Yeah. Yeah, it could be either way. No, either is fine in my mind.
Okay. Further comment or discussion, or I can try to phrase my motion as a real motion. Seeing no additional comment, my understanding is chairs can make motions also. So if that's wrong, someone please let me know. I'm okay, I guess getting some thumbs up. I move to revise our public participation policy to read at the bottom section. This policy was developed as part of the probably QUISP and BWIC startup phase. It may be amended as deemed appropriate by the QUISP and BWIC. Additionally, a working group of the BWIC will be created to focus on this public participation policy. End, period. Would anyone? Yes, Lindsay.
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Lindsay. Any abstentions or recusals? Sorry, truck just drove by. Seeing none, would BWIC members please raise your hand if you are in favor of this motion? All right, I see Beth, Lindsay, Dan, Lauren, Sarah, Kent, and Barry. Any nays? Seeing none, motion passes. I do believe in our last meeting, we had some volunteers for that subcommittee or working group. So I believe those are written down as well, and I will be in touch about that on the side. Yes, Barry, I think you're part of that. And Lindsay, maybe. I'll look back through the notes if I just volunteered you, Lindsay. All right, go ahead, Dean.
Yeah, so the second part of this agenda item has to do with a memorandum that Catherine Dimitrick has issued and shared with different committees that work with the Regional Planning Commission. In that memo, Catherine mentions that the Regional Planning Commission is updating the regional plan. That's something that by state law we have to do. It's now on an 8-year schedule. It used to be 5. The way that the Regional Planning Commission updates the plan is to develop or to update a set of guiding principles, and that's going to be one of the first things that the commission does. That's happening over July and August, I believe. And as the commission prepares for that work, Catherine and the commission want to know what people think about the Regional Planning Commission's new inclusion statement, which has been shared previously, I believe. She asked 2 specific questions. One was, will the Regional Planning Commission's new inclusion statement affect the work of your committee, this body? And then she's also seeking input to the question, what inclusion related goals should be included in the regional plan? The commission's hope is to have feedback from committees, I believe, by the end of July. I wanted to get this open for discussion. I know that these questions are not necessarily easy ones for people to answer in a group. What has happened is that a simple online survey was created to collect input. The link is on the screen. I can also drop it in the chat. But what the Lamoille BWIC has done is we shared the link to the survey. People are able to answer it, and it will be on the agenda for the BWIC to talk about the results that the members have provided. So that could happen. That could be what the approach is today, or if people want to actually have an open discussion of those questions, that's possible as well. But the survey is up and is able to be used to provide these answers.
And I'll just note those answers might inform our public participation policy working group. Could be helpful. Would anyone like to have a discussion of those questions at this time, or do we elect to just answer individually online later? If you would like to discuss it now, please raise your hand or come off mute and let us know. Yes, Jake.
So a question, again, this is a voting member versus alternate question. Are we all invited to do this survey?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Hearing no further discussion, it sounds like we would like to fill it out online after the fact. If someone disagrees, please just speak up. And thank you to Catherine and Dean for putting the survey together and for asking the question.
Thank you, Lindsay, for putting the link in the chat.
All right. Guidance for subgrants.
This is a topic that could be acted upon today. It's been introduced at an earlier meeting. I've explained that in statute and in the Act 76 rule, there's language that says the clean water service providers will adopt a document that is a guidance for subgrants. And what does that do? It establishes policy that has to be approved or subject to the approval of the council. What does it say in it? It will say that we issue subgrants to organizations, we give due consideration, we allocate administrative costs for project implementation. Actually, this is the one that I should have struck because there's no restriction on overhead here. But these are the statutory and language and rule requirements that says what this subgrant policy needs to include. So we at the Regional Planning Commission, as the quiz, put together a very, very simple document to address it, and it's in the package that I can share so that we have it all here. It's really just 2 pages, and in the that's what you see here. It's the first page of the document repeats the language in statute, repeats the language in rule, and says the different items that are identified in statute and rule, and then says what our policy will be. And it's as I know, it seems repetitive. We're restating the language that's in the rule in many cases, but since the rule and the statute say we are supposed to do this, we are preparing it for the council's consideration, and that we would, as the quiz, approve it after the council has approved it. The place that had generated some discussion is with the language that's highlighted here, where we had previously included language that would set a scale or would say that administrative costs would be varied based on the size of the project. When we went back and examined the language in the rule, that question is taken off the table. So the revision that we are proposing would simply say that with respect to language that says we must have a policy regarding administrative costs, the policy is that we will abide by the definition that's in the rule, and thus to manage and complete projects, those costs are not considered to be administrative costs. This is getting into the weeds, but it's a correction of what we had put forward originally, because what we put forward originally was not consistent with the rule because the rule says those costs are considered administrative costs. I'm happy to stop there.
So basically, the moral of the story is build in your administrative costs into your project costs and don't ask for a percentage.
That's the moral of the story regarding the one part of this that was, that was generating discussion last time.
I know in the Lamoille meeting, we had a discussion too about the RFQ being issued annually, maybe changing that language, like at least annually. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on the timing. We also had in that discussion made clear that we don't want to just be issuing RFQs and reviewing qualifications every month. So that would be my only comment. Does anyone else have thoughts or feedback? Hearing none. I don't feel the need to change from annually to at least annually if no one else thinks that's necessary either. So Dean, would it make sense to just adopt this
That would
language?
be great. That would be great if there was a motion to that effect.
All right, would someone like to make said motion or discuss another matter related to this? Kent, I'm not sure if you're raising your hand or leaning in.
Oh, he's on mute.
I don't have a comment. I'm just trying to adjust my glasses so I can read this.
Gotcha. I'm having a hard time seeing too with the glare, so I just wanted to make sure. Sarah, did you have a comment?
I would move that we accept this as written.
Excellent. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Dan Seeley. Thank you. Oh, hi, big truck. Do I hear any abstentions or recusals? Seeing none, please raise your hand if you are in favor of this motion. All right, I see Lindsay, Beth, Dan, Lauren, Sarah, Kent, and Barry. If please speak now if you are not in favor, if you are naying. I don't know how to phrase that. We should work on that language for me.
Any nays?
Any nays? All right, seeing none, the motion passes and is approved. Thank you, everyone.
If we can forge ahead, and I am aware, Lauren, that you may have to leave at some point, but what I'm hoping to do is to just talk a bit about the project prioritization framework. We are moving ahead, even though there are still some things being written. I saw a slide in a PowerPoint that DEC prepared that compared this to sailing a boat while we're building the boat. I've heard it compared to flying an airplane while the airplane's being built. And either one applies. We're trying to get the certain things understood at least and down in some preliminary way so that when the money starts coming in, we can apply what we know and get some work done. So we are talking about a project prioritization framework so people can understand the framework for what's going to happen when applications are submitted for projects. There's language and rule that says that when identifying and prioritizing projects, the QUISP and WIC shall ensure that the highest priority projects are the ones that go forward. I'm paraphrasing. That language also says that the QUISP and the WIC will consider factors that include pollution reduction, cost effectiveness, design life, cost and maintenance, and conformance with the basin plan. So this is a presentation to give people some idea. It's not rocket science, but just to lay it out in front of people so that we can see it and ask questions about it and understand it. And then eventually agree that, okay, this is the framework, we get it, we'll adopt it as a framework. There's language specific to prioritization in one paragraph that says that the WIC shall consider preliminary scoring and ranking of all clean water projects as drafted by the QUISP for both project development and implementation categories and make adjustments to the co-benefits that's part of that scoring. So what this just means is that applications are going to come in, the QUISPs are going to be prioritizing them and handing that to the WIC, because the WIC is told you will consider that preliminary scoring and you can make adjustments to it. And it'll be in at least a couple of categories. One of those categories will be early stage experimental or initial project development stuff. And then the other category is implementation. But I just want people to understand this, these steps. So this slide just shows what we're thinking will happen as far as the prioritization process. And again, this is framework. So this is stuff that we want to get out framework, and we can work out the specifics over time. But tentatively, there would be 6 categories that are used to determine a score, and the score is used to create a rank. Those criteria are going to be drawn from rule. So we're going to pull them from the rule, because the rule says that we shall use these empirical criteria. Another part of the framework is that we're thinking about is that not all of the criteria will have the same weight. The work that we're doing, there are repeated references to how the primary thing we're trying to do is advance projects that will reduce the amount of phosphorus. So that suggests that criterion having to do with phosphorus reduction is going to have some greater weight than others. So we're just saying part of this framework is that there will be different weights. We don't have those weights set, but when you have criteria and you have weights, you can multiply the scores and come up with a total. And then you can combine them, and that's what would determine the rank. Now, this is just, again, the framework. I have this slide to just make it a little bit more real to folks. Pollution reduction is commonly thought of as the amount of phosphorus reduced, either kilograms or pounds. Cost effectiveness, which is again one of those empirical criteria, that's how much per dollar. So how many kilograms of phosphorus can you remove for every $1,000 of cost? So that's cost effectiveness. Durability, what I call durability, is the lifespan of the project. So a project that lasts 20 years will have a different value perhaps than one that lasts 5 years. Operations and maintenance, again, another one of those empirical factors mentioned in the rule. This is one area where we're told we have to consider these things, but I'm going to assert that we won't have good data on what operations maintenance costs will be. And we may have to do some finagling with how we use it in prioritization, because if we all agree that the numbers that we have for what the operation and maintenance costs of a project is going to be are pretty dicey, then it seems like it might be wise to just reduce the impact of that. Another area, I'm glad Karen has joined us at the meeting, is the project's relationship to the basin plan. You know, specifically mentioned in the rule that we need to consider the QUISP scoring and the book scoring needs to consider how a project relates to the basin plan. So you can think of tactical basin plan conformance as one of those criteria, and it could mean, is it in the implementation table? or is it mentioned someplace else in the plan, there should be some kind of score that is given to it. Then the final area is co-benefits. I'm keeping things simple by saying these things are all, in a line. Co-benefits is something that there's ongoing discussion about. We will have some kind of more specific proposal about how co-benefits can come into play with rating. In the Missisquoi, I will dare say that the amount of funding is available for projects. The prioritization process is going to give us a ranking, but it will not produce, we won't be faced with a cutoff decision. So I don't want to say that the prioritization process is going to be less important in this basin, because it won't be less important. It's just that we will have, I think, more time to sort it out, because one of the reasons we do prioritization, the primary reason is to determine which ones we fund. And if the funding is available for all good projects, even those that are not stellar, we will probably still have the ability to fund. So I've used the analogy of a class in school. So you can think of each of the criteria like a quiz or a test during a semester, and we can use different formats for those tests. But you get a score for each test, and at the end of the semester, the teacher, the professor, whoever is combining those, and will give you a semester grade. I'm gonna, in the interest of time, I'm gonna stop there and see if there are questions, because some of you may have heard some of this because of your involvement in the Lamoille Council. But again, the issue for us is to make sure people can start to understand things like the criteria and rule, how we are expecting to lay this out, which is in a rather simple manner, nothing too complex or sophisticated. We know that there are other possible criteria people may want to suggest. So we want to hear those. The question that I'm going to ask people that have additional criteria in mind is that it's going to come back to this issue of weighting, because if the idea isn't already incorporated into one of the 6 established, I'll call them, criteria, how many more points will we have to spread to this new criterion, or what people might want to add? So anyway, Lauren, I see your hands up, and I can stop talking and answer questions.
I'll just say I do have to leave in a couple minutes, but I was just noting on that first page, it says that the BWIC has authority to adjust the score based on co-benefits. And I was wondering if we have authority to adjust the score based on any of the other 5 criterion as well. If, like, I understand they're more numerical and maybe set in stone, but I'm wondering, so maybe not that page, but the next one. There. For both project development or implementation categories, and make any adjustments to the co-benefits scoring as needed.
Yeah, so if I'm hearing you, you're asking, does the so if there's a clear set of criteria and we have accepted weights and there's a score given, can the council say, hey, that only has a score of 20 when it should be a score of 24 or something like that? I would say that in some cases it will be pretty clear. In other cases, and by that I mean these are pretty empirical. So if we are using the DEC formulas for calculating phosphorus reduction, we're told that's what we're supposed to use. But so it's not going to be something where it's likely we will change. We've calculated. Now, if someone says this is going to be a 1-acre project and that yields a certain amount of phosphorus reduction, but then we learn it's 1.2, if that comes out at the BWIC level, then I would say that's entirely legitimate. The BWIC can say, hey, you entered in 1 acre and it's really more than 1 acre, and that needs to be a different score. So that's where you're applying your local. I mean, will that happen a lot? I'm not sure. The places that may come into play more would be things like the tactical basin plan, just because that's it's less. I mean, there'll be some really clear cases where if someone's doing a project that is specifically mentioned in the tactical basin plan, comparing that to another project where it's kind of mentioned in the tactical basin plan, but it's not. That's where I think that the council could be saying, hey, QUISP, it is, you didn't see it, but it is in the plan. And so it should get that score. So to sum up, some of the things are not likely to change because they're coming from an application form and a calculation that's done using a procedure DEC, which says we're supposed to use. Other cases, depending on how these things come out in the end, I think that a place that will get some discussion is what I had said earlier about operations and maintenance costs. We will need to figure out whether or not we have good enough information to apply to all different types of projects on what the operations and maintenance costs are. And I think that the QUISP would be wise to listen to the kinds of feedback that it gets from council members on how operation maintenance costs are used in the rankings. But the thing in this paragraph that makes it absolutely clear is that you have the authority to adjust co-benefits. I don't know that that means that you are prevented from making corrections or identifying problems with any of the other scores. Because we want the scores to be right. And ultimately, the council's adopting the prioritization. So if there was some disagreement, and I think they would have to be sorted out. But in the end, the QUISP is working from the prioritization list that the council approves. Does that make sense?
I think we lost. I'm going to take over her chair duties.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Yes, Lindsay.
Yeah, no worries. Kent, you have a question.
Yeah, Dean, this is very helpful. This discussion is very helpful. And I just wanted to dissect this a little bit. You're calling for a preliminary scoring system. And I'm wondering, when will the council members have an opportunity to work on these formulas? Is this something that is open to a subcommittee formation? Or are you expecting us to have these in-depth discussions as an entire council? What's the plan going ahead? Because like you mentioned, there are a lot of questions, about how to apply the science.
Yeah.
There's also the issue of proximity to the problem. This last week, after those heavy downpours, I received from 6 different lakeshore residents some really disturbing pictures of flumes going right out and feeding the problem that we're trying to work on here. There's just a lot of discussion that can go into this formulation.
Yeah, so I'm deliberate in saying this is a framework. This is a little bit like in the Senate where you have divergent views on important subjects, and the approach is to try to get the broad outlines agreed to first, and then we will refine. So in my thinking, and we can talk about this when we talk about the schedule, and my thinking is that we talk about this framework today, this month, and we talk about it next month. And it's possible that next month there's agreement that yes, this makes sense as a framework. If between this moment and then people say, well, there really must be another pillar in this, and that pillar is, I'm going to take that information back and we can talk about it. We internally can talk about it And then we will sort out what it is that we bring back for your discussion next time. But if, so now is the time for people to say, there's something missing or there's something wrong, because we want to hear that and correct this framework. We are not expecting to meet in August, but my hope would be that if there's agreement on a framework in July, then between July and the September meeting, my hope would be that we can present something that is more refined, that is more like a specific formula, as I think you might have called it, that the group can kick the tires on even more. And it'll get more specific, and where you might even be able to do a test, like here's a project, here's a possible theoretical score, here's how they would compare. And as far as adopting it finally, I think it would take a couple of meetings for that to happen. Hopefully that helps. But framework first is the approach that we're taking, because I think that we're afraid or concerned that if we were to just throw a specific method at the group, we could be spending a lot of time discussing things that would be better to just address principles first. So that's why I'm saying, if there's some pillar beyond the 6 categories, as one example, what is that pillar, that fundamental piece of this that needs to be in it? Now you've talked about proximity, and I'm not quite sure exactly how that would play, but I'd like to hear more, or if there's someone else. I mean, I think that one comment that I've heard has to do with viability, and viability is something that could be part of the prioritization. I've seen it in others. I'm personally not as sure that it is as big a deal, because I think that the viability of projects gets taken care of through screening, which occurs as part of this whole effort. It's not explicitly part of the prioritization process, but it is part of the project development process. So, but there may be people that say, no, this system has to provide a score for feasibility. And my only reaction to that would be that if we are not getting feasible, if we're processing projects that aren't feasible, I don't even want to see them cluttering up the prioritization process. It's like, we shouldn't even be having to spend time on it, if that makes sense. Anyway. And Lindsay, I see Barry's hand.
I just wanted to say, would you mind going back one slide? I think that will show those, or maybe it was forward. I don't know. You sent out a very similar looking page in the packet that actually showed those criteria listed, just so everyone can see them. Yeah, maybe it's your other document. I think it was the last page of the packet. And Barry, go ahead.
Given that this process is going on in every one of the basins, I'm wondering if you, Dean, or others are connecting around this so that we're not developing these from scratch in every single region, in every single basin. I'm participating in another effort, a project where we work as a cohort and we kind of come together across the state to come up with kind of a baseline. So, in a perfect world, I could see basin representatives coming together around project prioritization, coming up with the basic framework, and then allowing the different basin members or the councils to kind of customize that rather than kind of coming up with everything from scratch in each basin. Just wondering. Yeah,
so the QUISPs do meet, and we do discuss the things that we are working on in common, and whether or not those things lend themselves to a similar approach or the same approach. The prioritization system isn't one that has been identified as a candidate for us all using the same framework as a starting point. I just don't, no one has advocated for that. It doesn't mean that it couldn't happen. My own view is that the basins are different. They have the conditions across basins really are very different. So I'm not sure that one model would work. I think that the models for the two basins that the Northwest RPC staffs could be very different because the size of the problem in the Missisquoi is so much greater, and the funding will be greater than the size of the problem in the Lamoille. The Lamoille prioritization system could focus, as one example, more on operations and maintenance because we don't need to advance nearly as many projects. That the way we will solve the problem over time or just sustain the solution is by channeling money more towards the operation and maintenance of existing projects. So that's just a long-winded way of saying that I think that tailoring these to the regions and to the basins is appropriate, and that so far that I haven't heard my colleagues say, hey, let's all try to adopt a single system.
Okay.
But again, I'm very interested in what people think about the categories: pollution reduction, cost effectiveness of that, design life, cost of operation and maintenance, conformance with the basin plan, co-benefits. I would be interested in what people think about the relative weights of the different factors. And then, as I said earlier, is there some other keystone factor that we should be thinking about in the Missisquoi that should be part of this? And Ken, I didn't mean to cut you off when you said proximity. Can you elaborate?
There are just a lot of thoughts that are going through my mind, and I know that I need professional guidance through this, but I remember back to my very first lessons when I was starting to get concerned about these problems and working with Mary Watson at the Rubenstein School, and how she emphasized that the projects that happen within 10 miles of the lakeshore could have a greater impact. The further you get away from the actual, from Lake Champlain, the more chance there is for phosphorus to actually to be bound or to be not have as much effect as some of the things we see right on the shoreline. This is where I seek professional guidance, and that's what my question is. This is something I'd take as a research project, and I'm trying to get some eyes on this to give myself some really strong guidance and some stronger ideas about where this needs to go, whether it's comprehensive or not. I see a lot of things here that I've seen before and are important, but I can also see where there's some real interconnections, because when I think about cost effectiveness, I take into account the durability. It's like when I look at on a farming project, for instance, if we look at to do a cover crop on a field for a year, the cost isn't very high compared to buying a no-till planter. But that is the fact is that cover crops got to be done every year. And if you look at over a 30-year life expectancy of a farm implement, the cost effectiveness is about the same. So, that's, to me, they kind of go hand in hand. So, it would be part of it. I don't know how you separate them out. And that's why I would be seeking some really strong professional guidance on this.
Any other comments or thoughts or questions? I see Tom's hand. Yep, sorry.
I'm going to go on video just so everybody can see me. I apologize, but I've been in motion in a car. Just just one thing I'd like to throw on the table is possibly the repeatability or the wide scale adoptability of a project. You know, I'll just use this as an example. We might look at a residential project where, you know, we're talking a 1/4 pound of phosphorus, and the cost effectiveness for a single project may not be that good, but because we demonstrate it as a group, it could be widely adopted in a very cost effective manner.
That, yeah, I hear you. I think that's an interesting point. Lindsay, I don't know if you see Karen's hand. Okay.
Hi, Karen.
Hi. So I guess the only comment, just as to provide some assistance in interpreting what it means regarding tactical basin plan weight, one should understand that the implementation table is basically the summary of everything that's in the tactical basin plan. So there shouldn't be a need to sort of hunt and peck through the plan to find other statements that might support a project. And there's always the danger of somebody taking something out of context. So it may be the group would want to clarify that it would be the implementation table that would be the what would be the guiding what that would be the guide for identifying co-benefit, and that for clarification you would go into the tactical basin plan to better understand something that's in the implementation table.
Yeah, thanks, Karen. And just to give a little bit more on that subject, at another council meeting, there was an observation made by someone from a town where they had a project in mind. So the type of project was mentioned in the tactical basin plan implementation table. It's just that the implementation table didn't mention their specific community. And so that may be one of those gray areas, maybe not, but it may be one of those gray areas where the council would see some rule for itself in trying to give some credit for the type of project, although the fact that the implementation table might not have been as comprehensive as it could have been, or maybe it's out of date or what have you. But that's just an example from another council where I think there's at least some possible rule, because the implementation tables do make it a much easier task. We can look at the tables and see, is the project in there? And then many times it's going to tell us very clearly yes or no. Is there anything else? I am mindful of time.
Go ahead, Ellen. Couldn't find my unmute.
Great, thank you. I'm just wondering if there's any explicit guidance in the criteria to provide just a nudge, a little bit higher ranking for either cultural or socioeconomic populations that have traditionally bared the brunt of a lot of environmental degradation. It becomes problematic because oftentimes, you know, geographically where we see problems that show up in vulnerable populations, they're not the source of the problem. That's sort of how our, you know, physical system works. The problem came way upstream. But just that if there's anything that would play specifically into the ranking score for something for a project either initiated by or serving that sort of population.
Yeah, the subject you're raising is definitely encompassed by this category of co-benefits, at least in my opinion, and I think most people would agree. So yes, there is a place for it explicitly in this category known as co-benefits, which the councils have a lot of role in applying. It could be everything from this project gets extra points because it is serving a previously unserved community. The project provides educational benefits to this project, can be implemented and helps job training for some. I mean, it goes on and on. So yes.
Kent, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, as I'm sitting here, more ideas are popping into my head, and I can just think of the guidance that our tactical basin planner has given me in the past in looking for projects and the opportunity to collaborate between different groups. And I'm thinking specifically when we sat down, we talked about our targets, about, you know, where to do the work. And especially in this Missisquoi Basin, there are areas where you may have one area where the stormwater or the pollution is not just coming from a farm field, it's also coming from a municipal road, or an interstate or a state highway. You know, there are areas where we could actually get different groups working together that haven't had an opportunity to do so in the past. And, you know, to help to improve the all-in philosophy that we're trying to follow with this work. And does that all follow under co-benefits, or does there need to be a separate pillar that emphasizes that opportunity for collaboration on this work?
Well, I think one of the things, part of my reaction to what you just said, Kent, is that it points to the need to have a lot of projects, and that we need to find projects in new ways and as a result of new collaborations. I'm not sure that I see the prioritization score as the key place for addressing that. But, you know, I'm hearing you say that perhaps there could be a boost given to projects that display collaboration. Frankly, in the Missisquoi Basin, I don't think that. I think we will need lots of projects, and the vast majority, if not all of them, will be able, at least in the early years, to be funded. And so the collaboration, the emphasis on collaboration should be to get more projects, because I think by and large they will be funded. Good projects will be funded. So that's just how I am seeing it. But like you say, if collaboration is important, maybe that is something that should be considered as an element of co-benefits. I know that in another meeting I was in, someone was saying something that sounded a bit speculative, but their point was that this project by itself may not seem like it's all that beneficial, but it paves the way for improved relations, and there will be more projects. Maybe that's an important co-benefit for this council. So maybe projects that have 2 or 3 or however many parties involved get extra co-benefit points. Is that what you're getting at? Maybe.
Sure. I think I'm just throwing ideas out for consideration, but yeah, I think that's the right idea.
I would encourage people, if they have thoughts, to share them, send them to me in an email and what have you. Again, I'm not trying to end this discussion today. We have 10 minutes left. It is something, this topic will be coming back. So Lauren and Lindsey and I can talk about it in terms of the council, and we can also be talking about it. We will be talking about it internally at the Regional Planning Commission. Are we ready to talk about schedule, Lindsey?
Yes.
Okay, so we've alluded to this earlier. Here we are in June. We've dealt with the bylaws and the public participation policy, subgrants. We've started this project prioritization framework discussion. Maybe in July, the group will be able to feel comfortable endorsing a framework. Something that I'm knocking on wood or crossing my fingers, we will have the ability to discuss is what the schedule for funding will be. That's a possibility. The so-called formula grants, which are really the agreements between DEC and the QUISPs, might be signed by then, but that's something that I want to put out there. We can also start to talk more about the application process, what the application requirements might be and the process, because I think everybody wants to know what that will be like. There's also been a request made to try to start talking about individual projects around the basin. And so we were thinking that we might be able to squeeze that in. I haven't put anything in August because we've been talking about not meeting in August. I haven't put anything in specific, but September would be when we try to commence an every other month schedule. I'm going to try to use a survey for the group to pin down a regular meeting day and date, day and time. That's something that I'm going to put in the chat. We've been talking about scheduling the meetings individually up until September, but when we get to September, we will meet on a regular schedule. So the link that I'm putting in the chat is one that will hopefully take everybody to a survey that you can use to help us choose that. And so everybody should be able to find that link now. Yeah, I guess I'll just leave it at that. Are there any questions about the horizon? Doesn't look like it. We've worn you out, and apologies.
I just
But I
want to thanks for making this like real clear, and I appreciate seeing this schedule. It appeals to my sense of organization, and it will be good to see what's upcoming when we get to the point where we can start populating September.
Yeah, I want to thank everybody for their involvement. We really rocked and rolled today, I think. Got a lot done. We will try to smooth out any wrinkles having to do with Abe's position and get that taken care of. And then would make a pitch. It will be handy to have alternates. So just keep that in mind. If you ever encounter someone in any situation, social or otherwise, and you think, hey, that person might be a good person to be an alternate, I wonder if, try to buttonhole them and see if they would be interested. We may be able to line them up.
Great. Well, I'll open the floor for any last minute topics or questions. We have 5 minutes left. If there's anything that people want to bring up. And if not, I will seek a motion to close out today's meeting.
I move we adjourn the meeting.
Okay,
I'll second it.
and a second from Dan. I don't think we need a vote on that one. So the meeting will adjourn at 12:55. Thank you all.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.